Welcome back. Now if you're like me, when you shop for camping gear, you look for the best quality you can get, the most durable and best performing equipment that you can afford. But that doesn't mean that you want to overspend every time you go buy camping equipment. So today we are doing the second in a series where we compare what I consider to be the state-of-the-art in the category to a cheaper competitor that is sold by Firebox Stove. Now if you're not familiar with Firebox, they have created some really nice gear at a very affordable price. And if you're familiar with their folding stoves, this is the one we use. It's a Firebox folding 5-inch stove, and it burns primarily biomass, wood, anything like that. But the problem is that you are not always somewhere where there is available wood to burn, or it may be wet, so you need a backup. And for us, the backup has always been the Trangia Gas Burner. Firebox recently released a burner of their own to compete with the Trangia. It's at a much lower price, but we're here today to see if it performs as well and if we think the quality is there. So first off, let's take a look at our competitors. So before we take an up-close look at the two stoves, let's take a look at how they come. First is the Trangia burner. It comes in a nice nylon case. And second is the Firebox, which comes in a mesh case. So the case is not as nice. I don't think it will last as long, but it still is nice to have the case with it. So let's see what these things weigh and then let's take a look. And I did want to mention that each one of these burners, if you buy it from Firebox, does come with the mounting pins required to use this with Firebox stoves. So let's get this on the scale. Including the pins, comes in at 216 grams or 7.5 ounces. Now let's see what the Firebox weighs. So the Firebox comes in much lighter at 134 grams or 4 5/8 ounces. Now I did want to point out that both of these mounting pins were supplied by Firebox when I bought the burner. I've owned the Trangia for a longer time, but you can see that the top burner, or the top mounting pin here, is my original pin. It is a much larger diameter than the pin that they just sent. Now I don't know if that is the way all the pins are made now, or if the pin that comes with their own burner is a smaller diameter in order to cut weight and to cut price. As we take a look at the Trangia, it does come with the two pins. The burner itself is shaped as if it were a burner from a normal camp stove. It has a heat shield, and it has a very nice valve. It's polished. Now this is made for Trangia by Primus, and it is made in the EU. Price at Firebox, including the pins, is $78.99. The Firebox burner comes, as I said, with two pins. Now this burner, as you can see, is shaped more like the burner that you would screw directly on top of a butane canister. It doesn't have the same dispersion, at least by the looks, but it is shaped like that. It comes with an inline valve. And one thing I did notice is that if you can see inside of these two, the O-ring inside of the Trangia burner is a much more substantial O-ring. I would guess that would be more durable. But until I use this for a period of time, I can't say. But I think that's another area where Firebox was able to cut the cost. And the one thing that really intrigued me about the Firebox, other than the price, is that it came with this heat dispersion plate. It's a titanium plate, and it fits on top of the burner, like so. And I thought this would be really good for the Omnia oven. If you didn't see my Omnia oven test, I'm going to post that at the end of this video, but I thought that would be good for using that stove, so that was one of the drivers of purchasing this for this test. So let's get to the objective testing and see how they perform. Today for our objective tests, we're going to do two tests. First is going to be a water boil time test, and the second is going to be cooking biscuits in the Omnia oven. So first thing, getting these into the Firebox stove is very easy. The way I do it, first pin goes in, you feed the valve through the hole at the bottom of the stove, you put your second pin in above the feed tube, and you snap it in, and your burner is ready to go. And both of these burners are designed to screw directly onto a butane canister. However, today we are going to use propane, and to do that you simply need a converter, and you can run these both on propane. We are going to go ahead and light each one of these burners. We're going to let them burn for about 30 seconds just to warm up. So let's look at the flame pattern on our Trangia. If you can see that, I'm not sure in this light, but you can see that it lights very well. It's warming up. We're going to get our fire sticks on the stove. We're going to put 32 ounces of water into the pot. And the reason we're doing 32 ounces, I don't know if there's some standard measurement for testing stove burners, but 32 ounces for us seems to work because it will make a couple cups of coffee and rehydrate a dehydrated meal. So this is the amount that we make, so that's what we're going to do the test with. And we are going to time these until they get to 211 degrees. Because of our elevation, our water boils a little bit below 212, so that's a good boiling point for us to test. All right, Trangia is warmed up. It's on high. We're going to get the pot on and start our timer. All right, we are getting very close. I have to hold the iPad this way, otherwise I can't. There we go. So the timer just went off. We're at 211. We've got a nice rolling boil. 4 minutes, 37 seconds. Let's get the firebox in. And again, I don't know if you can see that flame. Actually, what we'll do is we'll find a dark spot before we end this test, and we'll just show you the two flames. So let's let that warm up. Let's get the water in the pot. Again, 32 ounces of water. Both have been sitting out for the same amount of time, so they're the same temperature. And for reference, the water temperature at the start of this test is 73.5. It's definitely a much wider, less controlled flame coming out of this. It's shooting all the way to the sides of the stove. So I fear we're going to get a lot of heat going around the pot, but let's test it. So on the stove goes the pot. Timer is starting. And let's see how long it takes. So we have a little bit of breeze today, and one thing I'm noticing is this firebox is much more impacted by the wind. You can see it when the breeze kicks up, this flame goes everywhere. It almost seems like it's shooting straight out sideways from the bottom and then goes up. And again, the wind seems to really be impacting its ability to burn. We are getting close here with the firebox burner. But looking down at it, it is still, the breeze is impacting it and it's shooting flames everywhere. So it's a much less concentrated flame and much less controlled flame than on the Trangia. It's just sort of shooting everywhere. But we are getting close to the boil. So let's see how it did here. Okay. So how did the firebox burner do? 6 minutes, 42 seconds, 0.21. So that is more than 2 minutes longer than it took the Trangia. So definitely the Trangia won the battle of the boil. I thought I'd take a moment in the middle of the test to talk about why we're burning propane instead of butane for this test. And we will show you both burners using butane at the end of this video. So stick around to see if there's any difference. But we are using the Flame King refillable propane bottles, which are a one-time refillable bottle certified by the DOT for transportation. And I just find that much less wasteful than throwing away canisters either of propane or butane. And it is cheaper. For our second test, we are simply going to take the Omnia oven, which if you did see my review, you know loves a very low flame. If you haven't seen that review, I'll post that at the end of this video. But we have 4 crescent rolls, and we're simply going to cook the crescent rolls in the oven on low heat. We want to test how low these burners will effectively go. And I want to also give this titanium flame guard a test for the Firebox because I think it will make a difference, or at least I'm hoping it will make a difference, and that's why I really wanted to try this burner. So I've got the Firebox warming up. Let's turn it down a bit. We want low flame. Want to make sure these can simmer. Then I'll put on the burner plate and start warming up the base plate of the Omnia oven. And what we're looking for here is we want the top of the croissant rolls to be browned without the bottom being burned. That is a problem with this oven if you have too much heat. So we're going to test and see if this will work to give us some really nice and golden brown biscuits. All right, the base plate's warmed up. I've looked at the flame under the base plate. I'm really hoping that this will turn down far enough that the flame doesn't lick around the outside of it. But we're going to see. According to the croissant instructions, this should be 9 to 12 minutes. So let's get these on, and we'll be back in 12 minutes because it should take longer. I found that it always takes longer in the Omnia oven than it does in the regular oven, or what the instructions say. So we'll be back in 12 minutes just to test these and see how they look. So we're now 32 minutes in, and I'm a bit perplexed. The biscuits are not really browning at all, if you can tell. And I'm not sure if this titanium diffuser is actually blocking the heat. I thought it would act more like a flame tamer and create a more even heat source and would take a lot of heat right up through the chimney in the middle of this oven, but it almost seems like it's blocking it. We're sitting at 48 minutes, and even though I turned the heat up just a little bit about 15 minutes ago, we still don't have any browning on top of these biscuits. So I'm just going to call this test. We're going to try a different tack. The diffuser seems to be blocking way too much heat for any to come up through the chimney. Got a nice browning on the bottom, so the bottom plate's getting the heat from the diffuser, blowing it around the sides, but it's not letting any heat come up through the center. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to call this test. We're going to go and try this without the diffuser plate to see what difference that makes with one biscuit, so that we have enough to test the Trangia as well. So that's our strategy at this point with the diffuser. No-go. So in order to rule out user error and the fact that I may have used this diffuser plate incorrectly or expected it to do something it wasn't designed to do, we went ahead, we've got one biscuit in our Omnia. We're going to go ahead and use that to test this burner without the diffuser on it. We're going to cook that to see if it will go low enough to cook in the Omnia oven. The base plate's heated up a little bit. We're going to put this on, again with no diffuser plate, and see how it works. We are now at 35 minutes. No diffuser, on low, which is where we cook with this oven. And this is what we have at this point. Much better result than with the diffuser. But still, for the amount of time, I would have thought it would have been browner. I can't tell you why it's like that, whether it's the pattern of the burner or the power of the burner. Let's see the bottom. The bottom is done. So for whatever reason, it's not putting heat up through the center of the pan. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to try the Trangia and see if it's just these biscuits. We've not used these before. We did try like a control case in our oven at home, and they did get nice and brown, so they are capable of that. So we've got the Trangia warmed up. We've heated the base plate. We've got 3 of the croissant rolls in here. We're going to go ahead, put it on, and see what kind of result we get. And now I'm really curious myself, actually, to see if it's the biscuits or if it was the burner. All right, with the Trangia burner, we are at just at 20 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. I think these are looking decent. They are browned on top. They got a little darker on the bottom than I would have hoped, but they did cook, and that is 20 minutes. So Although not perfect, this oven is not known for keeping things from burning on the bottom, so I think these are salvageable and done in 20 minutes, as opposed to the Firebox, which went 30 and didn't get them done. So, had I had the silicone insert, perhaps that would have stopped the bottom from browning. So, that is the Trangia. And now let's take a look at the burn patterns. I promised that I would show you those in the dark so you could see how these work. But again, I think despite the bottom getting a little dark on these, I'm going to have to give this one to the Trangia as well. Now that was kind of fun watching those things burn in the dark. And after all of our testing, do I have an opinion? Well, you know I have an opinion on these two burners. So first let's talk about what you get with the Trangia for essentially twice the price of the Firebox. First off, you get an extremely nice valve system that handled the pressure difference between butane and propane very well. You get brass fittings, you get a very tight, nice weave on the hose. You have a preheat tube that allows this to burn more efficiently when the weather gets colder. Brass construction. It's just all around, it's a very, very nice burner. And of course you get a burner shaped like a stove burner. Now, for the price difference, what do you give up when you buy the Firebox? Well, first off, you get a valve that did not handle the pressure differences between butane and propane very well, which you saw in our burn test. Now, before anybody says, well, this was not designed for butane, actually on the Firebox website, it says with the adapter, you can burn propane with this burner. So no foul there. You also get aluminum fittings, a little cheaper hose, no preheat tube, and essentially much less control of the flame coming out of this burner. As you saw, it didn't handle wind well at all, and we did do a subsequent boil test using butane, and in that test, and we did start with colder water. So the water in the butane boil test started at 55 degrees, so it was almost 20 degrees colder. So take this test as a difference between the two stoves, not a comparison to butane versus propane. So the Trangia in this test boiled the water in 6 minutes and 37 seconds. The Firebox took 9 minutes and 37 seconds, so an entire 3 minutes longer than the Trangia. And if you recall the propane test, it was 2 minutes longer, a little over 2 minutes. So dramatically different burn quality with propane and butane. You also get, as I mentioned, the diffuser plate, which I had high expectations for, but honestly I couldn't figure out what it did. In order to make it work, you have to turn the flame up higher in order for it to lick around the edges, because it didn't seem to radiate much heat. So maybe if you're simmering, this comes into play, but I didn't find a use for it, and we didn't test simmering. So what is my opinion on these stoves? When we did the test on the fry pans, I was very impressed with the Firebox pan. You didn't give up much in cooking performance. Now, it didn't win that test, and I'm going to link the test here so that you can take a look at that. However, you don't give up much, if anything, in the actual cooking by using that pan. In this particular test, I do think you give up performance in these burners. For that reason, I think that if it were my money and you were wanting to look at a burner for your firebox stove, I would pay up and go with the Trangia. I think it burns better. I think it's got a better diffusion pattern on the flame. It's been a great performer for us for multiple years, so I think it's a great burner. So I would pay the extra money if I was looking for a burner to go in my firebox. Am I going to say the firebox burner is no good? No, I'm not going to say that. It's not as good, and it does have its faults. At that price point, given the burner's performance, I think there are other options that are worth considering. Now, the options I'm going to give you are canister options, which means they screw directly onto the canister. They don't have a hose. You don't need to mount it in the firebox, but they would make a great backup for times when there are fire bans or wet wood or no wood. And I would recommend looking at the Soto Amicus, available for $45 at REI, which includes a couple pots. The bottle top burner from Coleman, if you want to look at propane, if that's what you normally use, that screws right onto a propane bottle. It does have some downsides, but I think for the money, I think it's a good burner. And the last I would recommend would be the GSI Glacier burner, which screws directly onto a propane bottle, and it has a wider dispersion for the flame. So that's what I would do. If you have the firebox, don't throw it away. It does work, but I think there are other options that I would consider at that price point. I'm going to link all of those below if you want to have a look. I will put a link to purchase one of the converters so that you're able to burn propane on these stoves. Do check if you have a different type of stove before you do that. Some stoves specifically say not to use propane. It's probably a pressure thing, so just be aware of that before you purchase this and try to burn propane. I will also link at the end of this video my review videos for the Flame King refillable 1-pound propane cylinders, as well as the Omnia oven test. So, thank you for watching. We appreciate all of your support. If you haven't subscribed, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner. And as always, take care, and we'll see you outdoors.